I come from a background family of who was keeping camels, goats and sheep over 200 years, back to 1740. And climate change or climate information is not new to the pastoral communities, dating back around 1752, ahead of even the scientists.
SPARC has done a couple of projects around climate services focusing on pastoralists, but we realise that there's a disparate body of knowledge. So we've been undertaking a literature review in published literature to find out what we know about the state of knowledge on weather and climate information services, what's being produced, what information is being translated and transferred, and what information is being used by pastoralists at a local level.
I think the weather climate information service providers within the pastoral areas need to do a number of things. They should continue improving on how much or the quality and the timeliness of early warning information they need to give, but then they need to look at this standing sticky question around trust in what they provide. There's a big disconnect between what communities use in terms of early warning, that is community-based early warning, and then the contemporary early warning.
Typically, when we think of weather and climate information dissemination, we think of the farmers or pastoralists, or what we call small-scale producers. But there are a lot more users of the weather climate information services outside of just those small-scale producers. We have agribusinesses, MSMEs, organizations that work between insurance, market off-takers, input providers that can also in turn utilize these weather climate information services to either provide better value addition for their existing products or to be able to further downscale or to further disseminate this information to their smallholder farmers or to their small-scale producers that they currently have.
The climate information providers, what they need to do for dryland and pastoralists is dissemination channels, because a county like where I come from is very fast, and if you rely on one channel of dissemination, you may find that if it is the radio, not everybody in the county will be able to be reached. So you should come up with a different method of dissemination.
Pastoral communities are highly oral communities, so we need to consider potential for having an audio early warning. Basically, with improvement and development in artificial intelligence, I should speak to my phone and possibly get in my own mother tongue what the weather around me in specific kilometer square should be like and the outlook of that particular weather. We need to continue improving on our accuracy of the early warning. I think the timeliness in generating is there, but then along the pipeline of from the generation to transfer, there's a lot of loss. So when you move from the left to the right, by the time it gets to the user, either the information is not in the form that they understand or is not as timely as it would have been. So, and weather events keeps on changing.
Honestly, at my individual beliefs, I believe very much on indigenous knowledge practice. Whereas the other one is also good, sometimes it reaches me very late. Let's say information is being disseminated here in Nairobi, and I live 1,200 kilometers away in the grazing areas. So sometimes it comes late. They are not complementing each other at the right time.
The evidence base on weather and climate information services among pastoralists is generally quite small, particularly if we compare that towards what we know about crop agriculture, for example. If we look at the generation of information and the observations and monitoring, there's a lot of literature looking at the use of scientific forecasts relative to indigenous knowledge and the various ways in which this is being used in different locations. There's evidence from several East African countries. There's also information looking at how we can get information more effectively to pastoralists in different places. What we're finding there is there's a variety of different communication channels are used. Extension agents are often favoured relative to some of the more asynchronous methods of communication, such as radio, although radio is very popular, and increasingly and of relevance to pastoralists because of their mobility are the mobile phone mechanisms and the electronic communication mechanisms.
It's important to note that not all end users of weather and climate information have the same use for the information. For men, they might need this information to determine where they can take their animals for pasture and fodder, and where they will get water for their animals. Women, on the other hand, need this information to determine how much water they need to store and food, so they need to determine their water and food consumption. In addition, especially for women who are caregivers of people with disabilities, young children, people with chronic illnesses, they need this information to be able to determine how they will get medication for those with chronic illness and store this in case they're not able to get this in good time due to the adverse weather and climate conditions.
Definitely there are opportunities for businesses, especially those that already have existing business plans and already have a route to profit. Using weather information or weather climate information can be a complementary service that they can add on top of their already existing products and be able to maximize the profits off of that. They can also be able to better plan ahead in terms of, for instance, insurance, especially when it comes to crop or livestock. They can be able to plan for the policy and payments upfront if they have the weather and climate information services available from the onset.
The factors that determine the uptake and the use of climate information in the pastoral community are the literacy level. What happens is that the way the climate information is will be understood differently by different people depending on their education background.
Different end users need to receive information based on one, access to the different medias of information, how they access this, the different media. So if you're using radio, for example, are the women able to access the radios throughout, or are these being used by the men, especially the young men, when they've gone out for herding? A key takeaway for me from the program review workshop is the need for both modern and indigenous systems to really work together, and at the bottom line, to always consider the needs of their end users, not to look at it as a matter of just ticking a box, but who is going to get this information, what are they going to use it for, and when doing that, they consider that men, women, the elderly, young people will need this information for different things. So always have the end in mind as we all work on all this information.
My biggest takeaway from the workshop today is that pastoralists and small-scale farmers, or what typically AgriFilm works with, are very similar but very different at the same time. We see a lot of private involvement, especially when it comes to the highland or crop farming, versus what I'm seeing with pastoral communities, especially when it comes to geopolitics in the area.
Personally, I'm finding this event so far really interesting because we've got some pastoralist representatives here, but we've also got, for example, national and county representatives from Kenya Meteorological Department. And as far as I'm concerned, if we really want to make climate information useful, we really need to have those dialogues that bring all of these different parties together. I think this is a key part of this sort of translating and transferring of information, is that co-production process, not only because of the information that it produces, but because the dialogue in which those discussions take place is really important for people to have increased empathy with the perspective of other people within the climate services ecosystem.